This pisses me off.
Why are you wasting your time on a wormhole? Why not try to figure out? I'll give you my favorite approach.
Wait. Shut the fuck up. I forgot to add the button.
I'll give you my favorite approach. I think that if you include the four coordinates x, y, z, and t.
I'm not gonna censor myself because I'm freaking having sickness or whatever. Okay.
Of space-time, the four rulers needed to measure them, one of them being a watch.
I like how. Okay, listen. I'm all for making the guy of PBS Space Time be like, "What are you talking about?" But let's just keep watching because I would love to jab at him specifically. But this guy, this guy doesn't understand what he's even saying.
And then the six protractors, t with x, t with y, t with z, x with z, y with z, you get a 14-dimensional space. Imagine.
Okay, I don't know what you're talking about with a 14-dimensional space, but let's just say that we consider. Listen, the three-dimensional of space is all you need. You just have x, y, z. They go in all directions, right? They fulfill the entire physicality of space, right? There is no other. I don't know what the hell he just said. Nonsense.
We lived in that space rather than just the four that we are typically given. If you wanted to go a great distance, the first
We don't live in those, so
thing you do is that you would grow the ruler, because that's now one of the coordinates. You'd travel under that grown ruler, that would shrink the distance, and then you would transform the ruler back. That
no, no, honey. Oh my God. Okay, listen. What he's talking about is that let's say, right, you take what he's thinking of is basically an accordion. You stand on the end of the accordion, you expand the accordion, and it goes all the way to the other end of the screen. Cool, you've done that. That's a physical function and stuff. And then you simply retract it back so you can do a trip again. That's what he's talking about. Physically, what is actually going to need to happen and what is a lot better is if you take the distant area, shrink the distance between us so that we now have, you just step over, and then you just put the original space back to where it was. Now, there's a number of reasons why physically you can't bend space in that direction very easily. And there's a reason why he's talking about this idea of just expand the ruler. But what you don't understand is that when you expand, you're expanding everything, which includes a greater number of things. And when you're contracting, you're only working with the difference between you and your location where you want to go, point A and point B. So expanding the ruler and then you being on the other end, the thing that happens is you're just talking about the operation of a wormhole. I said it was the opposite. It's actually just in reverse order. The man's talking about the opposite of a black hole. You shrink and then you grow. With a black hole, you shrink and then you grow. With his idea, you grow and then you shrink. Right? So if I simply said stretch and my arm just reaches all the way over there, right? It just happens to reach all the way over there because of Stretch Armstrong or whatever. And then, boom, I'm touching this now instead. And instead of, but here's the thing, you need to have, one, a mechanism capable of actually doing the stretching, which involves making a large accordion that has to withstand the pressures and strains of the stretching. Like as a physical object, that's one thing. Trying to do that to space-time is a whole other thing, and it involves expanding and collapsing a gigantic ball that if you're on one side of the ball as it expands, that's the usual interpretation, is that you're making basically a black hole appear and disappear out of nowhere. That's how wormholes can physically happen. Which is not a wormhole, as you might expect. Proper wormholes, according to some people, are more like just a hole, and you go into some extra dimensional area, and you come out the other side. Instead of actually, it's not extra dimensional at all. It's the fact that the dimensions of regular space are crunched and pinched. And in order for the physical properties of those space to be crunched and pinched in such a way so that the space ends up being smaller and everything. I would love to see the rest of this video because he would simply say, you just described the opposite of a wormhole. It's the same function.
Kind of an operation is something that is potentially possible. We don't talk about those things because we talk about wormholes. Why are you wasting your time on a wormhole? Why not try to figure out, I'll give you my favorite space rather than just the four that we are typically given. If you wanted to go a great distance, the first thing you do is that you would grow the ruler, because that's now one of the coordinates. You'd travel under that grown ruler, that would shrink the distance, and then you would transform the ruler back. That kind of an operation.
Okay, listen. Being on the end of the ruler and then growing the ruler means you have to make a bubble that expands space forward, which is pushing everything, including the distance you're trying to get to, further away as well. You're not just expanding the ruler with respect to you, you're upgrading everything. So the thing about wormholes that are so much more appealing and attractive is that you have the area that you want to go to come to you, right? And then you let everything relax back into normalcy. But of course, let's forget about wormholes and black holes, or the opposite of wormholes, what he's talking about, and just forget about all of that, because first of all, physically, again, in order to make any of those type of spatial transformations, you need a large body mass capable of actually doing the thing that you want to do. You're not going to do it. A truly traditional, if you were to bend the whole space-time, the way they naturally think about it, okay, here's the other thing. This is important that you learn this. There's no such thing as the bending of space-time. There is no such thing as the bending of space-time. It doesn't happen. Which also means there's no such thing as time dilation. What is the bending of space-time? As you get closer to something like a planet or a star or a black hole, you get closer to its supposed gravity well. That doesn't exist. That's not how things work. But we say it is because of how the motions of objects move. And the motions of objects is one thing. The bending of space-time is a completely other thing. And the problem with that is that you end up with, like, false understandings of reality. Right? So if the bending of space-time does never occur, never occur. I don't care what you think about how a black hole works. Kick it out the window. You've been taught lies. The bending of space-time is a complete fallacy. Okay? What happens is objects move towards a planet or a star or whatever else because of tidal forces. And generally, whatever's heaviest ends up being pulled towards the planet. Whatever's lightest bounces off the heavy stuff and goes up to the top. Buoyancy. The basic thing that makes it so that we aren't just imploding or something. So, the reason why they think that there is this bending of space-time is because of a number of different measurements that record certain phenomenon that frankly are just oversimplified, I believe, and should never be considered as what's actually happening. So recently I saw a different video, totally separate. We're going to just go straight into that because I don't care. There was this other video. It pisses me off as well. Okay, not our atomic particles conscience. Like, are they self-aware? Forget that. That's not important. Um, Also, dude talks about Ukraine. My man Jamie Hyman says, "Hey, Ukraine, you're doing a good job." Russia, fuck off. Um, that's what Jamie says. Yeah, it would be great if, you're doing a war, you're trying to get into some other place, and you could just fucking talk to people about it. That'd be great if you did that. Just try talking about it. Because trying to force it with a war is just causing damage and stuff. Where the hell is that video I was talking about? Has it been that long? Okay, not that video. Not that video. This one. The Nope. I'm sorry, PBS Space Time, you piss me off more than most people. Because you are ridiculous.
Mars magma, and Neptune blue, and Israfil.
Okay, so there are a number of things he talks about. The annoying thing that I find with him is that he talks about the idea of electrons not being, um, they're more like the cloud of probability, and they're not like a bunch of little particles that are swinging around an atom. And as we look at them, there's no reason to think that they are actually this weird fuzzy cloud. It's more like there's this probability of where they would be. I've already explained in other videos that electrons go extremely fast. When you look up how fast an electron goes, you'll find a number like 2,200 kilometers per second. What does that mean? Does anyone know what that actually is equivalent to? Because an electron is how small? So I did some more digging. And apparently, an atomic mass width is 1/10 of a nanometer. Why are we talking about kilometers when we're talking about something the size it's going around 1/10 of a nanometer? I redid the calculation, and it turns out the just basically changing the values. It's 2.2 thousand kilometers, which is 1,000 meters, and then you got the conversion of a nanometer from a meter. So take all those bits of math together. It's actually 2.2 million meters per second, which compared to light speed, it's like 150 times slower than light speed, or 150 times, or light speed's 150 times faster than what these electrons are doing. So they're going fast. But then, knowing that 2.2 million meters per second, that's still a meter is a big measurement compared to nanometers, or a tenth of a nanometer. So I said, let's go to one more distance and say, how fast is it going compared to the width of an atom? The if it assuming it's 1/10 of a nanometer, right? So the number ends up being 2.2 quadrillion. Yeah, quadrillion atomic widths per second. Imagine going around an atom and you're in 2.2 quadrillion. I think is that not like a million billion or something? Yeah, it's a million billion, I think. Right, because you get another thousand, that's a trillion, another thousand, that's, yeah. So it's a million billion atomic width per second. I don't know about you, but just thinking about a million things inside of a tiny space is a lot. Multiply that by another billion, and you're getting the number of objects around an atom at any given time. This is one object going around an atom super fast. So it appears to be a cloud of probability because its speed is insanity. It's so incredibly fast that the only way to express itself, and the reason why it's able to possibly bump into its own after image, persistence of vision allows for only so much speed per second. Light is only going 150 times faster than this. So this is why you end up with light sensors looking at an electron being only as fast. They're able to see the blob. When you try to reconcile an electron, you still only see just one instance of where it is. Then you get that it is actually only in one place at any given time. It's just that those fragments of time are such fleeting moments that it's already spun around and bumped itself. I don't know if Superman can move fast enough to bump himself, except for if he were to vibrate, which he's done. But Imagine you want to punch yourself by holding your fist out away from yourself. And you go so fast. Basically, length contraction applies. And now, here's the thing, right? An electron isn't just the point-like little dot of energy. It's also the electromagnetic field that it influences. Meaning, yes, the electron is affecting the area around itself, and the electromagnetic field is being affected by the equivalent of tiny little bumps in this whole area around the electron. That's why you end up with all these different blurry pictures and stuff. You end up with these lovely patterns.
And doing other wave-like things. But are these...
But it's not wave-like. It's just an extremely tiny, extremely, for its area, fast particle. I mean, if you think of, like, oh, a million light years away, an electron is extremely slow. But if you think about how very tiny and close-knit the area of an atom is, and you think about the size of the electron, you would think that if the electron were to go any faster, it would appear to occupy even more area and be more solid around the atom. That's why when you give certain amounts of energy to the electron, and that's why any photon sent to the atom isn't just going to magically maybe hit the orbiting electron. It has a very good chance of hitting the electron. And when it does, it's like, nope. It gets a little kick, and it bumps up to an entire utter shell level because it cannot occupy the same area that it had with the same energy. It has to move somewhere else. And then it relaxes, and it goes back down to where it normally exists. If people were to think about electrons this way, it would totally get rid of a lot of this mysticism bullshit. They don't act like waves.
Wave functions really what an electron looks like? These wavy structures...
Listen, it's not that... Honey, it's not that these wavy structures are what it looks like because of... Oh yeah, we freaking took pictures of it. That's what it looks like.
Be more intuitive for something like the photon, which is literally a wave in the electromagnetic field, and whose most important properties like frequency and wavelength can be captured in wavy terms. But an electron has...
Listen, I don't even want to go into the rest of the stuff that he talks about because there's so much bunk in it. I don't want to deal with it, but I want to react to it for the sake of you guys understanding how much bunk there is in this video and how you cannot be allowing yourself to believe any of this. A lot of it is speculative questions and not actually based on, actually knowing what the fuck you're talking about.
Mass, it has electric charge, it has spin. Where do these properties live in a fuzzy wave function?
That's the thing. It doesn't live in a fuzzy wave function. Let's pretend, instead of looking at an electron, you simply have one car driving in a roundabout, and let's say that it takes maybe 5 seconds to go around this roundabout at a regular speed. It's pretty obvious that it would maybe take 5 seconds to do that. Could take a little bit longer, but let's say that we do that, okay? In order for a car to move the equivalent amount... Okay. the equivalent amount of space per... How do I put this? Imagine you had the electron moving in a straight line. Compare that distance to its length. Now, force the car to do the same thing. It would take years. How many years? I don't want to talk about it. Because I don't care. The point is, it would take years. And if you took all of that footage and tried to collapse it to the point of a second, all the information of the entire world would happen at the same time, and it would just be going around a circle in a beam of light that is so blurring, it's ridiculous. And you would be like, well, it had to have existed and bumped itself at some point. But for the car, it clearly can't. It's moving at a regular speed, and you just sped up the video. That's all you've done. And instead of looking at maybe... Listen, when you take the information of traffic and you speed it up like 100 times faster, they start looking like a blur. You can't distinguish any car from another car. This is quadrillion times more than that. Even 1,000,000,000,000 times more is a very large number. Who cares? We're dealing with massive numbers, orders of magnitude, more than you would ever have of speed, and in the area of its travel. Even if I'm wrong by an order of magnitude, it's a trillion atomic masses per second. That's still a trillion different spaces around the electron that it will exist in 1 second. And it does that all the time. Every second that goes by, it does another one of those quadrillion spaces per second. That's what it's doing. So, you think of something that fast and that incredibly dense and whatever else, you think of it as only a wave function, you're devaluing what an electron really is.
Efforts to represent the non-spatial components of the electron wave function, in particular the spin or wave function, which we talk about here, but these are attempts to visualize a pretty abstract concept, not really what the electron looks like. So let's take a look. Let's really zoom in. We can never actually see a fuzzy wave packet because the electron takes on precise properties when we measure it. Look.
That's a lie. We already have femtowave. Excuse me. We have a frequency shuffler, okay, that instead of using just one frequency, the difference between one frequency and another equals, we have the measurements down to a femtosecond. Look it up. It's a really tiny number or whatever. We've done that. And the changing of frequencies allows us to know the difference between all these different things with accuracies and measurements smaller, faster, more rapid in their recovery information than we have ever had before, which is amazing. So, to say that we can't see an electron is, first of all, ignorance. Second of all, just bad logic. You totally can see an electron. We have done it.
Looking at the electron means resolving its location and spatial structure. As we measure more precisely, the wave function shrinks to something particle-like. But
Yeah.
how far can we zoom? Do we eventually see a tiny ball or an infinitesimal speck of charge and mass? And where does that charge and mass live?
Would you like to maybe give references to any of the number of different experiments that have made the electron be visible? Or how recently, I mean, hell, we have this Einstein-Bose condensate where we've taken a photon, which is another 1,000 times smaller than an electron, and we have frozen it inside of that condensate glob of extremely chilly stuff. So so chilly, in fact, that they say the word microkelvin. That's so incredibly close to being not moving that you might as well say it's not moving. But it is still moving, just barely.
What does an electron really look like up close?
I would imagine if a microkelvin is what I think it is, the motion of it compared to its size is like a very tiny, the tiniest of wobbling. Like it doesn't move relative to its area in space. And even that is still to the point where if you were to stop moving your finger, you can't stop moving your finger that slowly. Clearly, obviously, otherwise you would instantaneously freeze every time you stop moving your finger or your head or something. So you are constantly buzzing. Whatever.
There's an agenda behind this thought experiment. The very act of zooming in to see what an electron looks like will reveal some vexing contradictions, for example, about why the electron has the properties that it has. These contradictions foreshadow one of the biggest problems in physics today. But that's for future episodes. Today, we're just looking at the electron. Let's try constructing an electron first, using classical physics. We'll do that by gathering enough electric charge from the surrounding universe and sticking it together. Like charge repels via the Coulomb force, and Coulomb's law tells us that the
Okay, stop. Stop. The electron is made out of a system that creates the function of negative charge. Although it also flows energy, magnetic energy, through itself. So
we want to drag two bits of charge, the more force it takes. That means it takes more energy to assemble a more compact ball of charge than it does a more diffuse one, assuming the same amount of charge. A bit of calculus gives it.
You realize that an atom is, for example, the major majority of the mass in an atom is not actually all the different parts themselves, but it's most likely how the interactions of each quarks and the quarks themselves, and it's how the engine runs, basically, that creates a certain amount of force, that creates a certain amount of weight and resistance and motion capability and all this stuff. It's not something that you can just say, oh, the constituents are what make the amount of heavy. It's how the function of the object reacts to the environment. So if you're looking at an electron, what you're really looking at is a pump. It flows electromagnetic field through it. How it does that, I don't know. Also, the energy is not just flown through it, but is bound to it somehow, as if it's a string. Although that string can be longer and shorter depending on how fast the electron is moving, because electromagnetic fields can be expanded depending on how much power you use. So you can have you can pick up a car eventually meters away without having to have more electrons added to the system. You're just adding more power. But of course, the bigger the thing is, the more electrons it can do things. I don't know. Don't ask me to be very explicit about how electromagnetism works on a freaking thing that can pick up a car from meters away. Anyway,
is the energy needed to assemble a ball of any given radius. And this is the potential energy that that ball holds after assembled. The smaller the ball, the more energy. From Einstein's
why?
relativity, we know that bound energy.
No, 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 no. Clearly no. You can't just go smaller and say you have more energy. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. Clearly, an object that is bigger would have more energy because more energy can fit in the space. Smaller energies, okay, depending on how the reactions work, can create a more vivacious function. But again, that's like the strong force inside of an atom. And it's because of the movement of even tinier things from one quark to another quark to the other quark and back again in a cycle that creates like the specific function that makes the positron a positron. Why would we not also assume that there is some kind of mechanism that is making the electron what it is? An engine, such as it is. Like, pretend you have conveyor belts formed into the shape of a donut, such that the inside and the outside roll, and so like the outside becomes the inside becomes the outside. It rolls and it circles like that. It's a terrible idea. Um, but just pretend along every axis around the circle you have a conveyor belt. It shoots all upwards in one direction, so the whatever goes from beneath is going to be sucked up. It's going to be shot out the top of it. Then the conveyor belts go around it and switch back to the bottom and go back up again. Basic conveyor belt function, only circular. That's an electron. So they're like a fluxing bead. And this fluxing bead has some interesting thing that makes it do its thing. Ironically, whatever the electron is moving through more electromagnetic field, its influence affects more electromagnetic field at the same time. It allows it to influence more area at the same time. So you have a bigger electromagnetic boost from the same electron because you made it move faster through space, or more area through space at any given time. Faster is an incorrect term.
Is equivalent to mass, E equals mc squared. So now we can ask the question, if we drag in 1 electron worth of electric charge until it's in a small enough ball that its potential energy is equal to the known mass of the electron, how big would that ball be? Well, around 2.8 by 10 to the power of minus 15 meters. This is the classical electron radius. It's the size an electron would have to be if its mass was all from the potential energy of its contained charge. But it's not the real size of the electron. Our experiment...
The thing is, an electron isn't just contained in its own self, it's flowing electromagnetic field through itself, so its full energy is fluctuating, pumping, and a lot of it is outside of itself. Just like how you breathe in and out air, the air is moving in and out. With the electron, the electromagnetic field is moving in and out of that space. Does it get compressed? That's interesting.
Tell us that the true size of the electron is smaller than 10 to the power of minus 17 meters, at least 100 times smaller than the classical electron radius. But
yeah, that's the definition of 17 versus 15. There's another
the mass equivalence of that potential
multiple
energy
of 10.
is 10 giga-electron volts,
Or
which
10 times
is
10, which is 100.
20,000 times larger than the actual measured electron mass of 511 kilo-electron volts. And if our electron really is point-like, having no size, then Coulomb's law gets a zero in the denominator, and the energy summed all the way to that central point is infinite. Now, the electron isn't really a ball of electric charge mutually repelling itself. Its charge does self-interact in complex ways, manifested in the activity of quantum fields surrounding the electron, as we'll see. But
the fun thing about electrons, the reason why it wouldn't repel itself, is because imagine if you had two batteries, the positive and the negative, towards each other. See, that's what an electron really is. Think of it as a battery. It flows the energy through itself. So the other electrons are able to also have the same flow of motion. The turbulence is exactly the same. Like the outside is all flowing downwards, away from itself, and the inside is all flowing upwards, or the other way around. Anyway, that's a good question. Which way is it flowing? Because you wonder which one has the bigger resistance, the inside or the outside. Clearly, you would think it would be the outside. So everything would be moving faster in the center towards up, which is what I said. And then everything along the outside pulls back, right? So as long as you have other electrons in line with yourself, everything is still moving in the same direction. So there's no reason for them to have any interference whatsoever. If you start getting abstract like this guy, you're going to lose focus a lot and have more questions instead of basic actual knowledge.
the equations and numbers I came up with...
I don't need equations.
I can join this act, but I have a few...
the energy contained in the
I don't need
electromagnetic
equations.
field that emanates from a bundle of charge of the same size. And so this energy does still contribute to the electron's observed mass. This issue of the...
If you always consider the electromagnetic field and the electron to be the same object, you're going to run yourself into the ground, never solving anything. The electromagnetic field is a liquid. First of all, the electron is a point in space that moves that liquid and is also interacting with it. So the thing is, if you have this if you don't understand that the fluid is being pumped, you might as well be staying home.
The electron's electric field, containing vastly more mass than the electron itself, is, or at least was, a real problem, and one that persists even when we switch from classical to quantum mechanics. But for now, we get back to the electron. What does our zoom-in look like when we switch to quantum mechanics, or more precisely quantum field theory? In QFT, we describe electromagnetism in terms of the activity of a quantum field. And each elementary particle is an excitation in its own quantum field, so the photon is an excitation of the EM field, and the electron and positron are excitations of the electron field. Quantum fields are sometimes described as these roiling oceans of virtual particles appearing and vanishing. This isn't very accurate. Instead, think of a quantum field as having the potential for complex and random fluctuations when it encounters a real particle. Those fluctuations can be modeled using virtual particles as a mathematical tool. We can model the Coulomb force in terms of virtual photons in the EM field imparting momentum between charged particles. Or we can model the spontaneous transfer of energy between the EM and electron fields in terms of a virtual photon turning into virtual matter-antimatter pairs. Pair production. in this case a virtual electron and positron. So if the EM field in quantum field theory is an ocean of virtual photons, at least mathematically, what does that look like? Well, viewed from afar, the activity of these virtual photons is averaged over into the smooth field described by classical electromagnetism. But as our zoom in reaches a certain point, around 100 times larger than the classical electron radius, we transition to a regime where we can't ignore the quantum behavior of the field. For example, as the field strengthens and our view
100 times smaller than a classic electron radius. Again, I don't know why I chose for the atomic mass or the atomic width when I talked about how fast they're going. If I talk about the electron width, then they're going even faster. The area is even more. And therefore, you instead of quadrillion, you end up with quintillion areas per second. In quintillion instances of a single electron orbiting a single atom. Unless you have two of the electrons, then you have double.
Arrows, we see that the interaction between the EM and electron fields strengthens. We can describe this as an increase in the rate of pair production, an increasingly active...
Okay, what I hate about this diagram is when you said you went 100 times more zoomed in than the radius of the electron. In other words, the electron, and you zoom in, and this tiny little space is what you're looking at, the electron's the size of a planet or something, or a bowling ball, instead of a tiny dot like he has expressed.
The virtual photons and the virtual electron-positron pairs that they spawn. This cloud of activity appears to grow stronger the closer we get to the electron. It's not just that we're seeing the quantum properties of the stronger EM field. The very act of probing the electron this closely amplifies quantum fluctuations. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle tells us that precision in spatial or temporal measurement leads to larger uncertainty in momentum and energy, respectively. The more precise our snapshot of that...
We were able to make a Bose-Einstein condensate. We know exactly where the shit that is, and we know exactly how fast it's going. It ain't moving because we made it stop moving, because we know what we're doing. So I don't care what you think about probing a small area and then saying it's going to make fluctuations and stuff. Yeah, we'll have interactions, but we can know what the hell we're talking about. And we can actually make a result like trapping a goddamn photon inside of a cold blob. We did it.
Electron, the more energetic quantum fluctuations we'll observe. We talk about this effect in more detail in this video, but the upshot is that the universe looks very different depending on the scale that it's probed.
What the fuck did I say to you already? I have so many issues with this video. There are issues with you thinking that it's blurred shells when they go super fast in a small space. I don't know why I said is. I don't know. I have so many issues with you thinking that they aren't blurred shells when that is what looking at super fast in a small space is or would look like. Now I know how I said what I said. So, yeah, basically you get something super fast and its only area is a small area. You can predict how many of itself you will experience in that area. So, again, with the car analogy, let's say that they run the turnabout in 5 seconds. So in 1 minute, they will do that turnabout 12 times, right? 5 seconds divided into 60, you get 12 intervals of that car. So the car will appear in the same place 12 times in 1 minute. Speed that up 60 times faster, it starts to look like a blur, and it appears that there are 12 cars in the same space with slightly different shades of light because of how time has passed. Maybe there's a bit difference of their shadow or the way that, but it's the same car is the thing. Multiply that by another 1,000 times or 1,000,000,000,000,000 times, the car looks even more blurry. It looks like there are trillions of cars in the same spot, any given spot. Unless you reconcile it to the instant of an individual car. And then you notice it's just one car going around the turnabout.
And so does the electron. Although somehow all scales knit together into a unified whole. We are now at very small scales, quite a bit smaller than the classical radius. Here, it's clear that the bare electron appears to be dressed in this cloud of virtual activity. This dressing is the source of our self-energy and the extra mass from the electron's EM field. As we zoom ever closer to the electron, the energy in the field approaches the rest mass of the electron, and a new interaction becomes important. Now, the virtual electron-positron pairs have a decent likelihood of directly interacting with the central real electron. Sometimes a virtual positron will actually annihilate with the real electron, which then promotes its once virtual partner electron to reality. It's as though the original electron shifted position. There are two important implications to this effect. One is that
Look, what he's trying to explain is, again, the idea of an electron jumping from one shell to another shell or area around the atom because it got excited by a photon. And again, that happens so incredibly fast that you're not going to see like residual like electron anything in between those two spaces because the instant happens so instantaneously that you won't see that travel. Instead, you'll see the residuals of everything that has traveled that is around, which is a blur of a donut surrounded by another donut. Yeah. And the reason why an electron would go up to the next layer energy, again, if you're giving it any more energy, if it's going any faster than what it already does, then it appears more times per second. And so it takes up more energy, and it has what I should say, it resists the hold of the proton even more, so it's also pulling away from the atom a bit harder with its added speed. But because it's going faster, the number of incidents of electron has increased. The area of space has only increased a little bit. So it literally can only exist at that speed in that shell because it's being pushed by itself there, and its speed only can go that fast. Once it gets to become slower, then the incidences of the electron are less of the orbiting per second, right? And then less of the positions around the electron per second. And so you have less what would appear to be less mass, right? and therefore you would have less energy, and therefore it can collapse into that smaller shell. That's what's happening. And it only made sense to me when I started looking at, well, how fast is the electron moving, and what's the actual relevant size, so you can understand exactly how many instances, how many, like, what it would look like to look at a still frame of the electron. And it is just trillions or quadrillions or quintillions, massive numbers in a very tiny space. Like, you have that many things around a galaxy, almost. There aren't that many stars in the galaxy, and we're talking about an electron taking up that many positions around a freaking. And we already have stars in the galaxy look like a blur, but we're talking about an electron. It's just one electron. You're built of electrons. Yeah. And that's also why you can't touch each other, because there are so many times where the electrons just slightly bumps the thing. You're actually not. Even your own cells aren't touching each other. They are apart from each other, technically. But then you got freaking snot, viscous fluid, and whatever else stuff that's all interacting and being like, oh, I want to be all stick together and whatever. And somehow it does. It's like, huh? If we only considered classical mechanics and didn't consider like binding forces and stuff, oh, we get so lost. Like
This
this guy.
effect actually rescues the electron from having the colossal or even infinite mass predicted by classical physics. More on that next time. Unfortunately, the second implication of this self-annihilation interaction is that we're never actually going to get a clear view of the electron no matter how far we zoom in.
Listen, you want to look at the electron and how it looks like when you zoom in the closest amount. The best thing to do is to have a smaller frequency of energy go through it at a rate that's so fast that you're basically picking up a single instance of the electron. Again, femtoseconds are faster than nanoseconds by so much more. I don't even know how much more. I could look it up, actually. I have another phone because I had to replace my phone. How fast is a femtosecond?
A femtosecond is a unit of time, not a unit of speed. It's a very short amount of time, equal to 1/4 of a second. However, we can use the speed of light to get an idea of how short a femtosecond is. Light.
What? Yeah, quadrillion. Shut up, please.
Travels at approximately 300,000 kilometers per second. In 1 femtosecond, light travels about 0.3 micrometers. Micrometers are 1/1,000,000th of a meter. This means that in the
Yeah, if you're dealing with something the size of whatever else and something as fast as whatever else, you really want to say, yeah, quadrillionth. That's a better answer because that tells you how many instances of an electron you'll get around the atom. And if I was confident and if I had the correct things, if I scripted everything, and if I gave you a proper representation of all the physicality and whatever and how it represents, it would be great and you would see it all and you would make sense of it and I would get a Nobel Prize.
blink of an eye, trillions of femtoseconds pass. A femtosecond is a
Yeah.
unit of time, not a unit of speed. It's a very short amount of time, equal to 1/4 of a second.
And you come... Wait, quadrillionth of a second. That's not fast enough to see an electron. You need to go faster, actually. Slightly, but we're getting there. If we're able to see in femtoseconds, okay. The way that we are able to see in femtoseconds, imagine you have a frequency that is constantly oscillating so that it's higher and higher and higher amounts, so that anything that we notice in the difference of the frequencies, we'll be able to see a resolute picture of the tiniest things that we want. Possibly an electron. This guy's just behind the times, I guess.
The stronger the surrounding cloud of virtual fluctuations, but also the more frequent these interactions become. At some point, the electron becomes this flickering blur that we could never quite fix the location of.
Okay, that's not how it actually occurs at all.
The mass ends up smeared out, both by the self-energy mass.
No, okay, you're going from... That's not what happens. No, duh, it isn't, because the damn thing is moving super fast.
And by what is ultimately Heisenberg uncertainty.
No.
The electron's charge is also smeared out by the latter, and also smeared by something that I haven't told you about yet.
Okay, when you say the latter, I can't even pay attention to what the fuck you just said to know what the hell you're talking about when you say referencing a thing you just said.
Could never quite fix the location of. The mass ends up smeared out, both by the self-energy mass and by what is ultimately Heisenberg uncertainty. The electron's charge is also smeared out by the latter, and also...
You could just say Heisenberg uncertainty. There's no reason to say the latter.
Smeared by something that I haven't told you about yet. Even before we got close to the central electron, virtual electron-positron pairs were smearing out that charge. Those pairs interact with the ambient EM field, with the positrons tending to shift closer to the center, while virtual electrons shift further away. This so-called vacuum polarization happens all around the central electron and has the effect of screening the external universe from that central charge. In fact, the observed charge should appear to rise as we get closer to the center, past this screening. If you calculate the effective charge screening all the way to infinitesimal distances, that central charge has to be infinite. That means the central electron...
Yeah, but of course we have a void inside that central charge. It's the column of where the electromagnetic field is flowing through. Because again, electron is nothing but a magnet, like a battery. It functions like that. It flows the thing through it. So there's nothing in the center.
Would need to have infinite charge itself to overcome that infinite charge screening. Of course, we now know that we can never probe the electron.
It's not that it is infinite charge itself, it's that the charge flowing through it is what creates the eddy current flows that make this supposed screening, whatever. When people look at this stuff, we look at these lovely blob
or what the particle might be when measured. For example, electrons in atoms are more...
I have to zoom this in. This is amazing. Look at this. Look at this. Of course, even a picture can only show you so many different positions an electron could possibly exist in. And this is not... This is more like millions, maybe, if you really want to think about it. But it's actually... What we're actually saying is quadrillions, not millions. Another billion times more of that. Another 1,000 million of this. It's like if every one of these dots was a million, then you have to multiply that by another one of itself and another 1,000.
accurately depicted as blurred shells than as orbiting balls. And a free electron might look like an undulating wave packet capable of interfering with itself.
It is a... But that's the thing, it is an undulating packet capable of interfering with itself because it moves... Again, if you have quadrillions of things, or depending on... Because of its speed and the area that it rotates around an atom, right? Look at just how many dots are on screen to represent a basic representation of what you think the electron's doing. But it's not doing only that. It's doing another billion times that. If we represented it the way it's supposed to be represented, you wouldn't get any resolution of there are these tiny dots anywhere. This is like 1 million times, or what is it, a billion times slower than a second, but you're still seeing whatever. It's not a proper example. If you want to see an actual like representation of an electron in a second, this pales in comparison. And it becomes more blurry, yeah. Imagine if you had to actually have an electron moving at the speed that it is said to have moved. Quadrillion, 2.2 quadrillion atomic whips, which is a tenth of a nanometer per second, in the space of a couple of, like 1 nanometer, right? Or a tenth of a nanometer, whatever. Or a third of a, more like a third of a nanometer. The point is, you end up with either trillions or quadrillions of electrons in that area every given second. That's how fast they move. That's how many you should expect in that area. Because it's crunched down because of the power of a proton. Protons are so powerful they can hold quadrillion objects buzzing around them every second. Only it's just one object, obviously. It's just moving super fast. But it represents as quadrillion different positions that object has taken. It's crazy. Look, I don't like him. I don't like this show. I don't like how it works. I don't like how you try to say things in the form of, oh, everything is waves. You forget about actual measurements. You forget about the proper speed of an electron. You forget about the interactions of the electron with the electromagnetic field. You get so abstract. No. I have no purpose. I barely have any purpose with this video because I wasn't able, like, it doesn't matter if I can learn something from it. It matters if it tells it, what do they actually look like? Well, one of his the important, if you want to think about this as being a video that will tell you what an electron actually looks like, the answer is no, it won't. So, is that helpful for you? No, it isn't. But also, like, it misguides. Some parts of the information in all of this are misguided and whatever. What is this?
And doing other wave-like things.
Like, look at that. Like, we've seen the two-dimensional representation of this. It looks like a straight blur. But in this reconciliation, it's looking like all the different individual dots. And that's what it physically looks like. The only thing is, that is for a fraction of a second.
But are these wave functions really what an electron looks like?
Yes! Like, if he were to simply do some basic research and be able to say what kinds of physical experiments have looked at
These wavy
that's good enough. If you look at the experiments that try to visualize what an electron looks like and say what their discoveries and things attempt to do and what they've accomplished. Like, the double slit experiment is so ridiculous in the fact that you talk about the electron itself acting like a wave. It doesn't. What you're noticing is the electromagnetic field doing an interference pattern that predicts where there are, that doesn't predict, it controls where the electron is capable of going, because in those interference patterns, God, I hate that it fucking doesn't listen sometimes. It shows fucking what did I? Yes, thank you, bitch. So, what you end up with, yeah, see these? Okay, imagine all these wavy parts where you actually see the wave moving forward, or the up and down on the top of the surface. Those are natural, constant movement, but as they move to the side like that, you end up with, this freaking gets smart, actually. You end up with interference patterns which make these dead zones in the middle. The dead zones are where the electron is going to be flowing through, because everywhere else is being pushed off to one side or the other side. That's so fucking smart. 11 years ago, and you're still making stupid videos. PBS FaceTime. I can't believe you.
Ones. One unfiltered conversation.
What is light?
What is light? What is light? That's a good question, isn't it? What is light?
Isn't it an element?
Light is brightness, I guess.
We have auras.
We all have auras.
Which are light?
Yes, they are. It lights up the room. It makes it not dark.
What's the difference between blue light and red light?
The colour.
It goes in your eyes and then you see stuff.
They range from white to red to orange to green. It's like the chakras of your body.
Can you see my aura?
No, not particularly right now.
Is it too bright out?
It's very sunny out here today.
Does that make it harder to see someone's aura?
Not necessarily.
If I was to explain it to a blind person, right, it would
Please don't get into auras. It's mumbo jumbo.
be the difference. You see nothing whatsoever as a blind person, whereas I see things in front of me.
To be fair, the question of what light is not an easy one. For centuries, the greatest minds in science debated this issue. In the late 1600s, Newton proposed that light was a stream of particles, or corpuscles. He proposed this in his treatise Optics. But at the same time, a Dutch physicist named Huygens proposed that light was a wave. And this debate raged on until it was settled by the experiment I've recreated today. Thomas Young's double-slit experiment. To make sure I got the experiment right, I went to the original source. With the help of Brady Heron, I managed to get into the vault underneath the Royal Society in London. There, I found Thomas Young's handwritten notes from 1803.
I brought into the sunbeam a slip of a card, about 1/30th of an inch in breadth, and observed its shadow, either on the wall or on other cards held at different distances, besides the fringes of colors on each side of the shadow. The shadow itself was divided by similar parallel fringes of smaller dimensions. Wow.
This is an experiment so simple that you could make it at home, and yet so fiddly that I have never seen it before done with sunlight.
I was thinking about doing it in a box.
Yeah, they do it with electrons.
Like a fridge box.
And you can take it out on the street.
Taking it out on the street.
Could I possibly interview you guys for about a minute? We're doing a science experiment. I have here is an empty box. And this is a little eyepiece where we can look in, and this is a hole. And I'm gonna place this slide above that hole. And if you look closely, you'll see that there's two openings. Very narrow openings side by side. It's a double slit. Now before we have a look, we need to tilt it towards the sun a little bit. So we want the sun to hit this double slit directly. What are we going to see on the bottom of the
obvious
box?
thing you think you're going to see is you're going to see two lines.
2 lines on the bottom of the box. And 2 bright bands.
2 little lines.
Yeah, I think it'll be one line instead of 2.
I can expect to see the whole box lit up.
It'll probably be a kaleidoscope of some sort.
A bunch of colors.
Probably, yeah.
Rainbow, different colors.
There, have a look. You expected to see kind of one line. Is that what you see?
No.
I see dots.
How many?
It's one circle.
Well, there's one in the middle strongest, 2 either side.
The 2 on the outside are multicolored, and the one in the middle is just white.
It's kind of a rainbow.
The rainbow color as well.
I've never seen this video.
Like there are more dots appearing.
I think I can even see more dots spreading along. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I can see tons of dots now. Not tons, but I can see dots spreading.
Ah, yeah.
Dots that way.
Either side.
Yeah, definitely.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's just nothing else apart from
2 slits.
2 slits.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
But all we're doing is we're putting a light through 2 very narrow slits side by side. So how does this make any sense?
There's some kind of principle involved there that the average person's not familiar with. That's the only explanation.
No, I'm really confused by it.
Yeah.
I'd like to find out why.
People were debating, is light a wave or is it made of particles?
So what causes that?
Well, if light were behaving as particles, you would expect them to go through each slit and just produce a bright spot underneath. So we would see 2 bright spots on the bottom of the box. But if light's behaving as waves, then the wave from one slit can interact with the waves from the other slit. I've got a demonstration here on a little pond where we can see this with water waves. I have 2 sources of ripples, which are basically like the 2 slits. When I create ripples with a single source, they travel out with circular wavefronts. Nothing particularly surprising there. But if I add a second source of ripples then we start getting an interesting pattern.
Yeah.
This pattern is created by the ripples from the two sources interacting with each other.
The interference
Where
pattern.
they meet up peaks with peaks and troughs with troughs, the amplitude of the wave is increased. That's what we call constructive interference. But if the peak from one wave meets up with the trough from the other, then we get destructive interference, and there's basically no wave there. And this is exactly...
And it's where the destructive interference is happening, where the electron is actually not pushed on either side, and is able to actually go where you expect. It's kind of the opposite, because the waves are pushing the electron around. It does the opposite way you expect, because the electromagnetic field is doing the waving. The empty spots are the only place where the electron is able to move, because it's otherwise being pushed on either side by the waves being pushing on either side. It's also interesting that the waves constantly expand in this way, even though once you get a certain further out, you wouldn't expect it to just continue to have the sideways motion as well, but it does. This is such a cool... Where the fuck did it go?
what was happening with the light. When the light from one slit met up, peaks with peaks and troughs with troughs, they constructively interfered and produced a bright spot. But if the trough from the wave from one slit met up with the peak of the wave from the other slit,
yeah, so you see the light's doing that thing,
and you wouldn't see any light there. It's light canceling itself out.
This is basically the same as like having 2 drops of water fall in a swimming pool.
That's right.
Exactly the same
And then
pattern.
they go and overlap. As this ripple overlaps with those ripples, down the bottom, you get a series of, you get like a bright spot, and then a dark spot, and then a bright spot, then a dark spot, then a bright spot.
Now there's a slight complication, which is that sunlight is composed of many different colors, and they have different wavelengths. So obviously they're going to meet up at slightly different points. And that's what caused the rainbowing effects as we go further from the central maximum. You saw the ones to the right were slightly colored.
Yeah,
that's because the reds are going to meet up at different places than the blues.
That's another crazy... Oi! Show this video to your kid about when he asked about rainbows, because... I mean, it's in his rainbow video. He made a rainbow video recently. But, I mean, there was this video with the ball and everything. This one. Specifically this one. The lasers and everything. In that video, he talked about something similar and such. But this is 11 years ago. It's still a good video.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
So the difference between red and blue...
that red bin over there and the green part is just... I'm seeing that, and it's just different wavelength. And that's how we bring in all these beautiful colours all around us.
Exactly.
That's amazing. I'm amazed. Oh, good on you. Thanks, man.
Hey, thank you.
I have been enlightened, literally.
But you see, the thing is, the double slit experiment was supposed to also happen with electrons, and the problem is that people don't understand the electromagnetic field and the electron itself are two separate things. So when you have the electron, it's only able to move in those empty spots where it's destructive interference, because there's no longer any push on either side. This is the only place where it can end up going, because it's in those spots where it's like, it's pushed on this side, so it goes here. Pushed on that side, it will go there, you know? But it depends on where it lands, where it goes through the slit to get to the other side and the thing. And so people said about electrons maybe being like waves, but they're not. They're tiny little dots. The electromagnetic field acts like a wave, and that's the difference, and it's confusing. the fuck? What the fuck? Particle. You should fucked up. Proving once and for all that the electron is not a wave. It's a particle. The electromagnetic field is a wave. And you can get confused like that. But you hopefully shouldn't. I want to teach people more things. Whatever. I'll see you in the next one. This has gone a bit far. What's my original prompt? What the fuck? What is my original prompt? How do I find it? Why are you wasting your time on wormholes? Oh god, wormholes and everything else. And I got off tangent again. The answer. Well, fine, whatever. I'll keep saying it till the cows come home until you actually realize what the hell you're talking about. And say it correctly. And teach people correctly. Because I'm tired of it. It's ridiculous. I make videos like this all the goddamn time. I want people to understand it properly. Science Me, check out the playlist. All this stuff can be found there, and you can listen to me talk about all sorts of science stuff, including physics and like the tiniest stuff and whatever.